Hello everybody, if it's your first time with us today, welcome, and if you've been here before, welcome back. This is the Chess for Charity segment featuring our Game of the Week this week. This past week, the Chess for Charity Jacksonville group had some exciting quads going on. Got a lot of groups out there. There were 5 different quads set up in total, so over 20 players there showing up, doing battle over the chessboard. And we've got an exciting game for you featuring 2 new players here. Both of these players were playing on board number 1 in round 1, kicking off the tournament with a bang, and that is going to be Dominick Dillon, who is playing the black pieces in this game, the underdog coming in at a 1309 rating, taking on Arav Patel, who was the highest rated player in the tournament, with the white pieces trying to start things off strong. So in this game, we're going to see some exciting action, and we're going to see just what can happen if not everything goes according to plan. So let's go ahead and dive right in to our Jacksonville Chess for Charity Game of the Week. One of the things we're going to focus on here with our game is the opening. We've got a queen's pawn opening, so Arav decided to play the move d4, marching his pawn to the center of the board, controlling those squares on c5 and e5 right away. And knight f6 from Dominick, maintaining flexibility. This can lead to a very wide variety of openings. And this could lead to Benoni-type structures, queen's gambit, who knows? It's sort of a waiting move in a sense from black to say, well, let's see what white's going to do. That way we can develop our plan accordingly and steer the opening the direction we want to go. Arav plays the move bishop to f4, so simply developing the queen's bishop out to the strong g3 to b8 diagonal. This move can be useful in a number of openings. A lot of times it signals that white is going to play the London system. However, this game does not end up being very much of a London at all. The bishop still comes to f4 in many queen's opening lines, such as the queen's gambit, and can be very useful because it's no longer going to be trapped behind this pawn when e3 is later played. Black plays d5 himself. We have a queen pawn opening officially, and after e3, so the bishop is now outside of the structure as we mentioned. White's preparing to develop his pieces naturally. And black plays bishop f5, and suddenly we're starting to see a little bit of symmetry in the game. So one of the keys to this game is not only going to be how black and how white go about their developmental setups, but how is white going to address the question of symmetry in the position when these bishops and the pawn structures end up looking very similar to one another? Well, one way to break up the symmetry is simply to attack that center right away. So white plays the move c4, immediately putting pressure on the d5 square. And one thing that c4 takes advantage of is the fact that in a lot of openings, rather than playing bishop to f5, what black will do in many things, such as the Queen's Indian or in a lot of lines of the QGD, is simply play that move e6 first. By playing bishop f5, it's true that black gets his bishop outside of the pawn structure, but because the bishop has come to f5, white can play c4, and since black has not yet played e6, there's no bishop b4 check that can be thrown in. A lot of times, black likes to meet this c4 move with the move bishop to b4, attacking the king, because now c3 can't be played in order to meet that. But now, because black didn't play e6 last move, white can attack the center right away, and let's see how black responds. Well, e6, a very solid move, going ahead, adding more support to that d5 square. Everything is shaping up fairly straightforward here, and knight to c3 will put more pressure on that d5 square as well. Now black has a couple different options here. One common idea is the idea that we mentioned before. Black could play the move bishop to b4, pinning that knight, helping to relieve some of the pressure because of that. However, Dominick took a different approach in this game and decided to make things a little bit crazy, a little bit fun, and that was with the move c5. So white has achieved his push c4, and black has decided to strike right back in the center with the move c5. Now, this is perhaps a slight inaccuracy from black, and the reason has to do with this bishop still being locked back on f8. We've talked a little bit already about how that bishop would love to come to b4, put some pressure on the king and the knight. But because white has already put this knight on c3, he's got more pressure on the d5 square. So he has two attackers on that. And it's white to move here, so white can open up the position in a way that could take advantage of things for his pieces quicker than black is going to be able to react here. Now, white plays the move knight to f3, which is a perfectly solid move, but one that does not take advantage of black's last move. What could Arav have done here in order to take advantage of the move c5? Well, one line would have been to go ahead and take this pawn, and the idea behind c takes d5 is that now you're opening up space for your bishop to be able to use that same idea that we were just talking about for black. Instead of black playing bishop b4, now it's white who can play bishop b5 with check and take advantage of the c-pawn being pushed forward. Black, of course, has two options to capture. The first one is the move e takes d5, and e takes d5 leads to bishop b5 check, and now suddenly black has a decision to make. If he defends with his knight, he has to either walk into the pin with knight c6 or knight bd7. If he plays the move bishop d7, this just doesn't look correct because the bishop already came out to f5. Retreating it to d7 would be a loss of moves. So you're kind of admitting that you developed your bishop to the wrong square on f5 if you do this. So black should play the move knight to c6 here. And then after knight to f3 and a6, attacking the bishop, we can make a couple trades on c6, go ahead and castle, and though this looks like it's still a fairly even position, the thing for the white pieces is that this e5 square is very juicy. It's very nice. This d-pawn has already come forward. White is defending this 3 times, and it's going to be a nice outpost for him to be able to plop a knight on in the coming moves. He's got some pressure he can put against c6. He'll put a rook on the c-file and be able to get a lot of pressure against black's position. So even though the position is still roughly even, there's no immediate danger for black, this would have been a way for white to take advantage of black's c5 move, try to jump into that hole with the move bishop b5 by opening up with the pawn capture. Had black played knight takes d5 instead of the move e takes d5, this also can lead to similar positions because now bishop can capture the knight on b8, and this makes it even more powerful when you play the move bishop b5 check. For example, rook takes b8, and now you can play either bishop b5 or queen to a4, and you'll notice that this bishop is trapped behind his e6 pawn and cannot come back in order to help. So for example, queen a4 check, and if black plays the move queen to d7, what's white going to do? How can you win the game on the spot here? Bishop b5, skewering the queen to the king, and so after queen a4, black has to play the move king e7, and white will have a very nice attack going. So this is a nice way that white could have potentially taken advantage of the early opening mistake. However, white decided to play a solid approach instead with knight to f3. And now we see more of this symmetry that we spoke of before. Black responds with knight to c6. And now we have to see how is white going to try to break this symmetry apart. C takes d5 was played, and the big difference now from one move ago is that after knight f3 and knight to c6, this move bishop b5 is no longer going to be coming with tempo. Of course, it can still develop and still pin the knight to the king, but we no longer have the option for bishop takes b8, and it's no longer going to come with check. So the move is not going to be as strong anymore as it was just a move ago in the line that we looked at. So c takes d5, and black responds e takes d5, and this is slightly inaccurate again as well. Remember when we looked at that previous line, e takes d5, and we could play bishop c6, and we'll end up in almost the same position we were before. Previously, we had looked at the move knight takes d5, and we said that white could respond with bishop takes b8. Well, the knight's not on b8 anymore, so now knight takes d5 actually works perfectly well in this position because there's no more threat of bishop takes b8. So e takes d5, slightly inaccurate because this can actually transpose into what we saw before. For example, bishop b5, a6, capture the knight on c6, and then you're going to have nice pressure against e5, a beautiful c file to attack on. This is exactly what we saw already. However, again, white did not go for the gusto right off the bat. They took a more solid approach, a little bit more conservative, and we're going to see how some of these more conservative approaches black is able to take advantage of as the game goes on. So white plays the move a3. Gaining some control over the b4 square, not allowing the knight to jump to there, and of course if the d-pawn trades off, not allowing the bishop to come either. So simply playing solid. Everything is sound, everything is equal. Nothing too scary going on just yet. Black plays c takes d4, deciding to relieve the tension in the center. And now once again, white has another shot to sort of take advantage. And which capture is best here? 3 different captures for white can take with the e-pawn, the queen, or the knight. Which one do you think is best in this position? Well, I think we can all rule out the capture with the queen. That would simply lose our queen to knight takes on d4. We don't want that. So we have either knight takes or e takes. E takes d4 is what is played in the game, and once again, this is a fairly equal position. Everything is looking symmetrical. Except now there is a slight difference that white has played e3 where black a3 rather, where black has not played a6. I actually think this is nicer for black because a3, though it keeps these pieces off b4, it's not so clear that this is where these pieces want to go in the first place, and essentially white has just sort of given that first move advantage over to the black pieces. So e takes d4 would not be the best move here, though this is what happens in the game, and we'll see how black is able to take advantage of it. Instead, what we want to play here is the move knight takes d4, and this is going to immediately put a tempo on the bishop and cause black to ask some serious questions. Once again, if you retreat the bishop, you're kind of admitting a minor defeat in that you moved the bishop out, and then you simply retreated it right back. And if you decide to trade, instead of taking the bishop, then after the move queen takes d4, white has a very nice centrally placed queen. And yes, it's true that maybe queens can come under attack when they move out early in the opening, but this knight is very far away from attacking the queen. The only piece that can do it is the bishop with a move like bishop c5. Black could prepare this, but white could even play the move b4 and gain control of the c5 square, stopping any ideas. And white has a lot of attacking ideas as well. Bishop b5 is his immediate threat. The rook can come to c1 or d1. Maybe a rook a c1 and castles, followed by the other rook to d1. Lots of very strong squares for white. And this pawn on d5, this is what we call that isolated pawn, right? No more support. Black has no e-pawn or c-pawn in order to come to defend this guy, and white is going to harass this pawn for the rest of the game, turn it into a target. So always take time when you're looking at those captures after c takes d4. See what could lead to what. White decided to play sound and symmetrical, but knight takes d4 was white's last chance to gain the advantage. And we're going to see that the game slowly shifts now. After e takes d4, it's going to be black who plays very nicely from this point on, and white no longer is going to have any more chances to be able to take over the game. So how does black make use of this? Well, bishop to d6. And this is similar to that idea that we said before. White could have taken with the knight to challenge black's bishop. Well, black is developing the bishop and challenging white's bishop on f4. So white has to either capture or move it away. The options really are to play to g5, g3, retreat along the diagonal, or simply to trade. The problem with trading is that, well, this helps to centralize the black queen. White has simply gotten rid of their bishop, and black gets a little bit more central queen. This is perfectly fine for black and looks nice. So white decides to keep the bishops on, try to maintain some tension, but after bishop e3, closing off the e file, maybe fearing some threats of something like queen e7 check. The problem is this bishop is now very passive. Black has gotten his bishop to c6 and is now on this nice active diagonal, and white's bishop has been relegated back to the passive e3 square where all it does is defend his own isolated pawn. Black goes ahead and castles, a nice natural looking move, and white plays bishop d3. This is almost the same idea we just saw black play, isn't it? Well, the difference is how black responds here. So black could play the move bishop e6 and white could castle, and we would have almost a symmetrical position again. We would keep seeing the same ideas, but black decides not to do that. What does black play here? Bishop to g4, and this move pins that white knight on f3, and suddenly we see a couple things in the position, small differences, but undoubtedly I think we can all agree black's d6 bishop is better than white's e3 bishop. White has a nice bishop on d3, but the black counterpart on g4 is still doing something active. It's pinning this knight on f3. So black has slightly better bishops than white. The knights are very equal. I think we can all agree on that. They're both doing pretty much the same jobs, except that white's knight is pinned. So perhaps you could even argue that black has slightly better knights in addition to the bishops. How about our king safety? Well, black has already castled, and white has not done that yet. White still needs to castle, so black has the slightly safer king. The only thing white has done that black has not is played the move a3. And though this does keep some pieces off of b5, once again it's not clear that these pieces need to go to b5. And there's also now a hole on b3 because of it, so maybe the knight will even consider the idea of playing knight to a5 and taking aim at the c4 and b3 squares in the moves to come. So these things all add up to white no longer having any special advantage at all. There's no longer any first move advantage for white. Black has equalized perfectly well in the opening, and now let's see what will happen next. White moves his king to safety as well, and black plays rook e8, bringing the rook to the open file. And now white decides, hey, I have to do something about this pin on my knight, and plays the move h3. And here, black decides to go ahead and play bishop back to e6. So still moving back toward that symmetry that we mentioned before. It's true black could have played the bishop to h5 and maintained the pin on the knight. However, one thing that is still going well for black here is that if the move queen d7 comes, this h3 pawn sometimes can be used as a lever. Sometimes black will have some sacrificial ideas of capturing that piece and tearing open the white king side. Now, white plays bishop g5, and suddenly things are starting to look a little bit in reverse of what they were a few moves ago. Remember, white had their bishop on e3 and d3. Black was pinning the knight on g4. And now it's almost the exact opposite. Black's bishop has retreated, and the white bishop is now pinning black's knight. So maybe black is no longer slightly better. Well, h6, and now bishop h4 from white. So white decides, rather than retreating to e3, to maintain the pin. But one of the slight differences here is that this move h3 has already been played. So even though white maintains the pin, black has the option, if they so choose, to potentially play the move g5. And now if the bishop comes to g3, black can consider maybe capturing this bishop and trying to double white's pawns on the g-file. This may or may not be so bad for white at all. It still is a very solid structure, and he would get the open f-file to attack. But these are the sort of tactics that white is always going to have to worry about. They always have to be looming in white's mind, because this bishop is slightly more loose after the move h3. Well, black decides, hey, you know what? I don't want to play that g5 right away. I don't want to open up the f-file or give any attack on that. I'm going to get rid of the pin a different way, and I'm going to play bishop to e7. So now removing the pin on the knight, and white responds bishop g3. Since the bishop can no longer be captured there, it simply moves to that square before black can do anything about it. And still the position is roughly equal. It's looking quiet, not a whole lot's going on, and black decides, all right, let's attack that bishop. Knight to h5. Again, putting pressure on here. White retreats with bishop to h2, and now bishop back to d6, and again black continues to harass and question this bishop. Where has this bishop gone today? Well, remember, it started on c1. White brought it to f4. Black played bishop d6. It retreated to e3. Later, the bishop moved to g5 to pin the knight. Black played h6, forced it to h4. Black decided to remove the pin. White moved away before anything bad could happen, brought it to g3. Then black harassed it with knight h5, and now again bishop to d6, and this bishop has moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times already and is still being harassed by the black pieces. So even though it's an equal position, a lot of cat and mouse going on in this opening. Well, white is fed up with this bishop facing off with the enemy pieces and decides it's time to jump into the position with the move knight to e5. Get this bishop out from under this immediate attack and place this knight right here in the center of the board. First thing you might ask yourself is, oh goodness, the white knight just moved to e5. This means the d4 pawn is hanging. Can black play the move knight takes d4? No, and why is that? Well, because knight to e5 not only centralizes the knight, but unleashes the queen so that white can play knight takes h5, a discovered attack on the white knight. So knight to e5, a good centralizing move, and black has to do something about the knight that's under attack. And here black could retreat. He could play a move like knight to f6, but Dominick finds a move to continue to go forward and try to keep pressure on the position, and that is queen to h4. So queen to h4 comes into the position and keeps that pressure on the d4 square. Now white has to respond to this threat against d4, as well as do something about this bishop that's now entrenched in white's position. Maybe this queen is going to cause some trouble over here. And here's where white perhaps goes slightly backwards and plays the move knight to f3. And knight to f3 is another sound move. We've seen this a lot from the white pieces so far. Black has challenged white in small ways, and white has looked for very sound ways throughout to try to deal with it. However, the problem with knight f3 is, well, we just played knight e5. So now by retreating it, we're simply, once again, admitting my idea wasn't that good, I made a mistake, and I'm just going to come back and try to push you back away. Knight f3 attacks the queen and defends the pawn on d4, but black throws in a nice little intermezzo here. Bishop takes h2 check, and now white has to decide between knight or king takes. Of course, if the knight takes, then the d4 pawn will be hanging. So white plays king takes h2, and the king is okay on h2, though maybe slightly awkward, as it will be prone to some attacks in the future. And black decides, okay, let's go ahead and deal one of those right now. Queen f4 check, and white plays the move g3, and this is a move that you always have to be wary of. Anytime you have your knight on f3 in these sort of positions, and we push that pawn on g3, the knight is going to become very, very loose. And black simply moves his queen back to f6, keeping an eye on d4, adding more pressure there. So now white is having to decide what to do about black's pieces, which suddenly look very actively placed toward the white king side. And here is where the big blow comes in the game, the big blunder that changes everything from roughly even, though I like black's position a little bit better, to winning completely for the black pieces. And now comes the move knight to e2. And what is happening here? What just blundered for white? How can black take advantage of this? If you don't see it, make sure to pause the video, take the look, find the winning move for black. What white has done is decided to add a second defender to the d4 square, but unfortunately the problem is the queen on d1 no longer defends the knight on f3, and black can simply play queen takes f3, winning a piece. And this is not good news for white. Now, first of all, white didn't need to worry about defending this pawn, and why is that? Let's imagine that white plays a move like rook c1, for example, and black decides to take. Why would this be a mistake? Well, after knight takes knight, the problem is black cannot recapture this knight, because if queen takes d4, white has a nice tactic that can be played here, and that's bishop h7 with check, winning the black queen. So king takes and then queen takes queen. Very classic tactic. It's common in a lot of French defense positions, and a very good one to know, because you can defend this pawn with a sort of X-ray defense. This queen on d1 and this bishop on d3. A lot of times these discoveries make it so that the queen is essentially defending that d4 pawn, even though it's not eyeing it right away. So knight e2, unfortunately, hangs that knight, and after queen takes f3, we're going to see things fall apart very, very quickly. White plays the move queen to b3, and this is a cheeky little move, and I really like this, setting a trap, right? So white is down material, they've just lost the knight, but are they going to give up just yet? No, white is willing to fight, and what is the threat here? What happens if black plays a move like, let's say, knight to a5, attacking the queen? What can white do now in order to take advantage of the black position? Well, it's actually the same tactic we just looked at. Bishop h7 again, and now the queen is discovering attack on black's queen, and after the king takes, oh, how the tables have turned, and now it's the white pieces who are winning. So very cheeky move, queen to b3, and black sees this idea, says, I'm not going to deal with any of this, and decides to play the move queen to f6, simply moving away and retaining the piece. A very sound way to play, however. There was a very nice sharp line here that I'd like to show you, because this one's a lot of fun. Let's look at this. Black to move. We're already up a knight. So we know that when we're up a piece, we want to trade down, try to keep going to the endgame. Black has a very nice way to force more trades off of the board and even win more material. The move is bishop to f5. Oh my goodness, how this would turn it around for white. White had this nice discovered attack, but now if bishop takes bishop, the discovered attack's turned around, the pin is released, and black can take the queen. If you don't move the bishop, well, I can simply take it here with my queen. If the bishop retreats to c2 after queen takes queen, queen takes queen, now it's the rook whose discovered attack on the knight wins another piece for black. So you can't play bishop to c2. If you try to defend with the knight with a move like knight to c1, so once again thinking, I'm going to get out of it this way by moving my knight. Now, knight takes d4, attacking the queen another way and bringing the knight closer to white's king side, so that if you take the bishop, in order to try to trade some pieces off, your knight's defending the queen now, so you're trying to hope to attack this queen if you can. Well, I can simply take your queen with my knight. And if you move the queen away, where's she going to go? You're running out of squares. So let's say you play a move like queen to a4. Well, for one, the bishop is hanging, so that's not going to be any good. Queen to c3, try to hold the bishop. Well, now a very deadly blow from black. Knight to f4, and oh my gosh, look at these pieces. Threatening mate in one, so you have to play a move like rook g1 or bishop e4 to try to stop it, and everything is falling apart. So bishop f5, a very nice way for black to have immediately ended the game on the spot. Queen f6, a sound move, retains that piece advantage. Black should have no troubles. Nothing wrong with this. And let's see how black does deal a finishing blow in just a couple more moves. So rook a d1. Now bishop f5, the idea of trading down the pieces. One move late, unfortunately. No more scary tactical blows. Rook f to e1, and this is one more mistake from white. What has happened now? Well, the f2 pawn's not defended, so how can we take advantage of that? Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and now our queen is released on the f-file. Queen takes f2 check. Only one move here, king to h1, and how can black punch right on through the white position and crush the enemy forces? Rook takes e2, a very nice sacrifice here, sacrificing the rook for the knight. And what's the point? Well, after rook takes e2, knight takes g3. The king has nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Only move is queen takes g3, and after queen takes g3, black has a rook, a knight, and a queen for white's 2 rooks, not to mention black has 2 extra pawns, so this is completely over. Nothing white is going to be able to do. That said, Arav does play on. He's able to defend for 20 more moves, so kudos to Arav in this game for putting up and showing some real fighting spirit. However, black does go on to win the game, and we'll go through the moves here very quickly. From this point on, I think it's clear that black is going to win. White is trying desperately to get anything going, but there's just not enough. These black pieces are way too much. And one thing we do see is that black even decides to simply trade everything off and simplify. So this helps white to last for a few more moves, but of course there is nothing that white is going to be able to do in the end. Slowly pushed further and further back by the black pieces, and ultimately checkmated right in the middle of the board. So a nice game from Dominick Dillon, starting off the quads with a ferocious upset on board number 1. Make sure to come out, check out Jacksonville Chess for Charity. Wednesdays, we've got lessons at the Southeast Regional Library. On Saturdays, there are tournaments being held. They rotate between Blitz, Quad, and Rapid tournaments. So be sure to come out and check those out at the Pablo Creek Library. And make sure to look for more videos on our channel here. Lots of fun instructional content through Chess with Nick. I hope to see you guys in the future and see what you can do in your games to come. Hopefully soon we'll be seeing you in next edition of the Game of the Week. Best of luck.